And now I'm right. Share the screen. So we're beginning off with the Pesach Haggadah. Now this is what we have on the screen here is a crucial point in the Haggadah. It's it's like a few minutes into the whole Pesach Sedra. But it's really the beginning of the actual talking about going out of Egypt. And so it says, Avadim hayinu leFaraoh b'Mitzrayim, we were slaves to Pharaoh in Egypt. Vayotzienu Hashem Elokeinu misham, and God took us out from there. B'yad chazaka v'rizroa netuya, with a strong hand and an outstretched arm. And it goes on to say that if God hadn't taken us out, then we would still be slaves in Egypt. And however wise we are, even if we're all sages, very knowledgeable, still we should tell the story of the Exodus. And the longer we spend on it, the better. And so that's this bit of the Haggadah. And that's the point at which the discourse, the Maimah, begins. And it's a Maimah that the Rebbe said in 1988. So he said it on the Shabbat, which was Shabbat Parshat Tzav, like this week, Shabbat Parshat Tzav. And that Shabbat was the Shabbat before Pesach, as it is for us as well. And that Shabbat is called the Great Shabbat, Shabbat Haggadah. So let's have the Maimah melody, and then we will get into the actual discourse. So the melody goes like this. Oh yam bam ba ya ya yo ya yo ba ya 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 yo ya yo. Oh ya yam ba yum ba boom. Oh yedam ba yum ba ho ya yedam. Yamba yo ya yeridamba yamba yum ho yeridamba ho ya ya yeridamba ho ya yeridamba ho ya ho. So now we're going to look for the discourse. Let's see if we can find it. 1 second, not so easy. I have to put it up again. I thought it was there. So 1 second. Here we are. Right. So. Hello, Rabbi Lou. Greetings. Thank you for coming on.
Hello, yeah. Nice to be here again. Did I miss the niggin?
Right.
What a disappointment. I'll go on mute and sing to myself.
No, it really was. You sang beautifully. It was something else. You really did miss something, Rebbe.
It's good to see everybody here. Hi, Ophir.
Right. Okay. Hello, Nicole.
I'm glad to see that Cheryl was there, visible.
Yes. Right. So here we have this discourse from 1988. Avadim hayinu leFaraoh b'Mitzrayim. We were slaves to Pharaoh in Egypt, as we just read in the Haggadah. And the Rebbe mentions that this is the custom that on Shabbat Haggadol, on the Shabbat before Pesach, there's a custom after Mincha to say the Haggadah. And so he mentions this custom. So that's beginning off with the words Avadim Hayinu. we were slaves. We were slaves to Pharaoh in Egypt. And so the Rebbe then refers to the discourse that is going to be the background of the discussion here, via line 7. Now it's known, the Hasidic discourse on this, B'siddur im divrei Elokim chaim, the Siddur with Hasidic teachings. Now this Siddur with Hasidic teachings was published by the second Lubavitcher Rebbe, Admor Said, the middle Rebbe, he's called, the middle Rebbe, and Rabbi Dovber, and it was published, I think it was 1816. And what the Siddur basically comprises are Hasidic teachings by Rabbi Shner Zalman, which were transcribed and sometimes elaborated by his son, Rabbi Dovber, the Mittler Rebbe. And in addition, the Rebbe mentions in line 11, there are also further discussions, explanations and comments by the third Lubavitcher Rebbe, the Tzemach Tzedek, and they've been printed elsewhere. And so it means that this discourse that we're looking at through the lens of the Rebbe's discussion has been taught by the three Avot HaChasidut, the three patriarchs of Hasidism, of Hasidus Chabad, Admor HaZaken, Rabbi Shner Zalman, called the Alter Rebbe, Admor HaEmtzai, Rabbi Dovber, the middle Rebbe, Admor HaTzemach Tzedek, and Rabbi Menachem Mendel, who was Rebbe around 1850. And so all three of them, they created this discourse, which now is being discussed by our Rebbe. So we are moving on now. Now this actually is something very central, as he says in line 25. The words Avadim Hayinu, when we say we were slaves in the Haggadah, Hu terutz al she'elat, or the kushyat bincha, it's the answer to the son. It's there comes the manishtana, and the Avadim Hayinu, we were slaves, is like an answer to the manishtana. The manishtana is the questions asked by the child at the table. And in particular, the Rebbe focuses on Ben HaChacham, the wise son. There's the different categories of children that are mentioned in the Haggadah. So there's the wise son, and it doesn't mean, and so he himself is he's someone who is has got a special quality. So that's line 9 on the next page. He's not just wise, he's impregnated altogether with the special quality of wisdom. And he knows the difference between Shehu Yodeh Makir, he knows the difference between the different kinds of mitzvot. This is how his question is interpreted. What is the difference between mitzvot, which are statutes, mitzvot, which are basic laws that people can understand, and then there's another kind of law which are in memory of some events, and he's talking about those three kinds of mitzvot. And so he is asking, Ma ha'edut v'hachukim, what are these testimonies and statutes, and so on? That's what he's asking. And so the answer to him is this phrase begins, Avadim Hayinu, we were slaves to Pharaoh. And what the Rebbe is explaining here, line 14 and 15, this answer, which comes from the Torah, is true wisdom. It is the wisdom and will of the Holy One, blessed be He, which is Chochmat HaTorah, which is the wisdom of the Torah. And from all this we understand, This idea, we were slaves to Pharaoh in Egypt, it's something central, it's something essential. It's a very important concept. So what exactly are we going to understand from this idea that we were slaves to Pharaoh in Egypt? Now, in fact, what the Rebbe is going to teach here is a very profound concept, which is certainly central and essential. So, so that's what we're going to be looking at and exploring a little bit further. Is there any comment at this point yet? We're only really just beginning, but just in case there's someone who's not quite on board or has a question that prevents them from understanding what's being said. So here we are. We imagine that it's tonight is Tuesday night. Next Tuesday night will be the looking for chametz. I hope you got my email saying that for the next 3 weeks, we will have our little session on a Monday evening rather than Tuesday evening. So that will be the Monday before Pesach, the Monday in Pesach, and the Monday after Pesach. So those will be the 3 Mondays, and then we'll go back to Tuesdays with the help of Hashem. So here we have this situation. Everyone is sitting, not on Tuesday night, but on Wednesday night next week, sitting at the Sedra Wednesday night and Thursday night, and experiencing the very beautiful atmosphere in the Sedra. The child has asked the 4 questions, or maybe several children have done so. Some people have the custom that everyone asks the 4 questions. And then comes the answer, we were slaves to Pharaoh in Egypt. And the way the Rebbe is going to explain this through the teachings of Rabbi Shmuel Zalman and his son, Rabbi Dober, and his son-in-law, who was the grandson of Rabbi Shmuel Zalman, Rabbi Menachem Mendel, the 3 patriarchs, so to speak, of Chabad Hasidism. Through that discourse, we're going to see something really essential and central about our lives, not only on Pesach, but every day of the year. Okay, so let's see if we're able to follow this beautiful teaching and internalize it. Now, so this is on the 2nd page. Badrushim. It's explained in various Hasidic teachings, right? So this is page Vav.
Excuse me, Rabbi Loewenthal. Which year is this mimer from?
1988. Tavshim Memches.
So I'm gonna have to get enough. I'm looking from a text over here on my desk. Okay, so I'm gonna get it. I'll get it. Memches.
Right.
Sorry. Sorry for interrupting.
Right. So it explains in Hasidic teachings, there in the Siddur, the Siddur with Hasidic teachings, that when it says we were slaves to Pharaoh in Egypt, that means Perusho Shema Shahaya Yachol Liot Inyana Avdut V'Shibud, the fact that there was able to be slavery, it's because we ourselves were in a spiritual situation which is called Pharaoh. So Pharaoh is not just the king of Egypt 3,300 years ago. Pharaoh is something that has to do with you and me, and it's a quality within ourselves. Line 22. The hine paro hu otiyot ha'oref. The word paro, which is the Hebrew for Pharaoh, is the letters ha'oref. You can see the oref, the pay is the last letter. So it changes form. It's a long pay. It's a final pay. But otherwise, there's a pay, there's a resh, there's an ayin, and there's a hey. Now that word ha'oref means the back of the neck. And from this we can understand the Inyan Paro, the Maila Beruchniut, that the concept of Pharaoh in spiritual terms, Yuvan will be understood, mi'inyano shel oref ba'adam atachton, will be understood by considering what does it mean the back of a person's neck in a human being here below. And the reason why we're called Adam, which means man, person, is because Adam relates to the word Adameh, I am similar to. We are similar, we are made in the divine image, we have a similarity to the divine. And so therefore, by examining the concept of the back of the neck in an individual, in a person, we are able to understand more clearly what does it mean, Pharaoh, in spiritual terms. So line 25 on page Vav, we are considering the difference between oref, the back of the neck, the difference between the back of the neck and the face is. Now, what's the difference? When you look at a person's face, and the person is a genuine person, there's revealed in the person's face the essential inner life force, their inner desire, what they want, what they are longing for. The face, we're talking here of a very sort of pure and honest person, that in their face is revealed their whole essence. But when we look at the back of someone's neck, we do not see any kind of revelation of their inner life force or ratzono or their true will. We only see an external dimension. We see that there is a person. We can see the person's alive. We can see that they're trying to do something, maybe, maybe we're looking at the back of a person, they're sitting at a computer, they're typing something. All right, so we know they're doing something, they're writing something, but we've got no idea what they're really doing. If we were to be looking at their face, the way the discourse presents it, we would have a much better idea of what is the real desire of this person, right? So we're talking about a person who, that's somehow there's a sort of a clarity in their face, and when you look at their face, you feel what they want, what is their inner desire in life. So this idea of the inner desire contrasting with the external desire. See, the external desire is basically what we're doing step by step in life. So let's say a person has a very important meeting to go to, let's say in another town, in Birmingham. So in order to get to Birmingham, he has to go to the right railway station, which I suppose is Euston Station in London. And he goes to that station, and we can see him buying a ticket to get on the train. So we know his external desire is to get to Euston, and then to get to the ticket office, and then to get to the right platform, and then to get on the train. And the train is going to Birmingham. But we don't know anything about why he's going to Birmingham. What is this important meeting? What is it all about? That is something completely different. So there's the external will and the inner will. Now, the inner will is that there he's going to a meeting, which is something very meaningful to him. He's meeting an old friend whom he hasn't seen for many years, let's say. And so there's something very special happening. But we don't know about that when we just see the external dimension. All we see is the way he is trying to get to Euston, to the train station, to the ticket office, to the train. Now, if we consider this in terms of the divine, when the inner will, the supernal, the spiritual inner will of God, is not revealed. From this it's possible. Then it comes about that there might be the real physical Pharaoh, the oppressor of the Jewish people. And it can even be slavery to Pharaoh. We were slaves to Pharaoh. So in other words, the fact of us being slaves to Pharaoh comes about from a dislocation within us, a dislocation between our inner will and our external will. And that relates to an aspect of the divine. There's the inner will of the divine, and there's the external will of the divine. And so when the inner will is hidden, whether on the part of the divine or, which in a sense corresponds, in our own being, that our own inner will is hidden, then the only thing that is visible in ourselves and to ourselves is the oref, is the back of the neck. In other words, there is no clear communicative face of our own looking at ourselves. We don't see it. We're not aware of it. Instead, there's only the back of the neck, the dogged trying to do something. As an English writer, I think it was Hardy said, Thomas Hardy, he said, the average man lives in a mood of quiet desperation. So there we have a person living in a mood of quiet desperation, trying to do this, trying to do that. But what his or her inner will is, what they're really trying to achieve, that's hidden from them. Then they're not sure. They don't know. They don't even think there is. If you said, what is your real will? What is your deepest desire? It might be something very unclear to them, or something which you might say is peripheral. So then we are in such a, since there's this dislocation inside ourselves, there comes the possibility of being slaves to Pharaoh. Now, so line 4, that's on the 3rd page, which is page Zayin. And one can add in this, the very fact that there is the back of the neck, the external aspect of the will, that is, as it continues in the straight statement, we were slaves to Pharaoh in Egypt. That is the idea of Egypt. It's a matter of narrowness and contraction and limitation, as we've mentioned many times, that the word Mitzrayim, which I'm showing on the screen now, Mitzrayim, that word is the name for Egypt, the country on the map in Hebrew. But if you point it slightly differently, it becomes the word Meitzarim, which means limitations. And so therefore, Egypt represents limitations. And when we're talking about the back of the neck, that is the concealment of the person from the person themselves, which is mirrored in spiritual terms above, in terms of their relationship with God and the way in which they do not see the inner will of the divine either. And from that comes the whole idea of the oref, the back of the neck, which is the same letters as Pharaoh. And from that spiritual state of spiritual dislocation can then follow grief in this world and the actual slavery to Pharaoh in Egypt. Now, this is quite a hefty statement that we've just uncovered. Rabbi Lou, you haven't been able to find it? Rabbi Lu, do you
Yes,
have,
thank you. I found, yeah, as long as I knew the year.
You found it.
I have,
you
yeah,
have-
yeah.
Okay,
Thank you very much.
okay. All right, so this is a fascinating concept. That if there's an inner dislocation in us, then it can lead to negative things beyond ourselves. But the focus is really on what is happening in us, and the idea of having some kind of inner freedom, or in a sense, inner slavery. And the way that I understand this discourse, that Rabbi Lu might comment and present a different view. The question is, to what extent an individual is aware of his or her own direction in life, and what are they really trying to achieve? And we can be living in such a way that we're not aware of our own face, or our face doesn't communicate, because the way it's presented in the discourse is that the face of the person, obviously to a perceptive viewer who sees the person, the face should be communicating something deeply inward. And I think what the discourse is saying is that most of us have a blockage in the system, or a dislocation, if you like to use that other metaphor. And we're not sure what we are seeking. The deeply inward dimension eludes us. And we may not even think in those terms, or many people don't think in those terms. And exactly that is what Hasidic teaching is trying to help a person achieve, to become more aware of what their own deepest longing is, and should be. It is, in a sense, because that's the longing of their divine soul, but they may not be in touch with their divine soul. And so the discourse in this sense is about some kind of self-awareness and coming to terms with one's own inner self. And the person who is in touch with their own inner self is described here as being free. And the person who is not in touch with their own inner self is described as being a slave to Pharaoh. And the Pharaoh is their outer self, which is the outer quiet desperation of daily life, without being able to find the meaning with it. Okay, so is there any comment so far on what we've tried to present? Rabbi Lu?
Yeah, very beautifully put. You know, sometimes I wonder whether it means, or also means, when a person is leading a double life. You know, but I'm not sure that that's here in these words here. That definition of slavery to the inner Mitzrayim, in the Egypt. What does it mean that the Chitzonius Haratzon and the Pnimis Haratzon are the inner will and the outer will are identical?
They should be identical.
Right. Yeah, but what is that goal? How is it manifest?
I think it's manifest that if we take the inner dimension of the person as the divine soul, it means that the outermost level of their life, they're living in harmony with their divine soul.
All right, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah, and
that everything's aligned. They're transparent within themselves.
Yes, yes. Now you see, we have here a very interesting concept, that we know that the divine soul wants to keep the laws of the Torah. So therefore, the person, by trying in their daily practical life to follow the laws of the Torah, the mitzvah, whether it's kashrut, Shabbat, putting on tefillin for men, lighting Shabbat candles, whatever it might be, that is what the divine soul wants. And it's possible for the person to work hard to try to align themselves on that outer level, to align themselves with the inner level. Now, from that, I think the unspoken promise within the discourse, between the lines, is that if you're trying to align yourself, you actually will align yourself. That there is actually an alignment taking place. And the fact that the person responds, whether it's to Shabbat or to the coming Pesach festival and all the rules about Pesach, the fact that the person responds to that, that is like massaging, imagine a hand which has got frozen in the cold, and then you massage the hand and you make the hand like do certain actions. So that is bringing this life force into the person, so that the person's nature, instead of being like the back of the neck, becomes like the face, which shines, which is transparent, as Rabbi Lu said. It's aligned and transparent. So, okay.
And maybe a person who's trying to reach that on a certain level, that is it as well.
That's a very beautiful way of putting it.
It's never going to be perfect.
That's a very beautiful way of putting it, that we are reaching for something which is deeply spiritual, but the very attempt is something highly significant. And in the sense that that attempt, it itself expresses the alignment. Okay, so we go back into the discourse. So we are on page Zayin, and it's line 8. And it elaborates this very point we've been speaking about. The Inyan who the subject is as follows. The Inyan said, this fact, sheyachol liyot inyan ha'oref, that it's possible to be the back of the neck, chitzoniyut haratzon, the external aspect of the will, and that there is in such a way, ubivchina kazu, it's in such a way, sheyesh ba itchalkut, that it's divided. There's a division between the external will and the inner will. And sometimes in that case, it might be that all that is revealed is only the external will is revealed, and not the inward. Because of that, we can be slaves to Pharaoh. That's why we are able to be slaves, because there's this division, there's this dislocation, there's this non-alignment. But if we reach a level where there is no division between the inner will and the outer will, and the whole nature of the person is like the face. The face is the honest, transparent, inward revelation of what the person is in spiritual terms. So the face is a metaphor to that. Obviously, there are people who whose faces do not express their inwardness, and people who use their face to conceal themselves deliberately, what they call a poker face. Yes, the guy is holding 5 aces, 4 aces, but he doesn't let that on. You wouldn't know that. So, so when the person is aligned in the most total way, then there's no back of the neck at all in spiritual terms. Obviously physically there's the face and there's the back of the neck, but in spiritual terms, every side, every aspect of the person is total, as it were, inwardness and revelation. In a way, that's what a Rebbe is, right? A great figure, a great tzaddik. Every aspect of what they do is transmitting something spiritual. There's nothing ordinary about a Rebbe. That's if you watch the Rebbe, open a letter, or, it would have a spiritual effect on them. And we should all have, what this discourse is saying is that we should all have this sort of some kind of spiritual inwardness, all of us, each one of us on our own level. Now that's why this idea of Pharaoh, which reads as the back of the neck, relates to Egypt. Egypt being the place where everything is limited, as we scan from the repointing of the word. It's the same letters, the same consonants, but with a different pointing, making the word meitzachim, limitations. Because as regards the meitzah, ki mitzad inyana meitzah, you see there we have the word limitation in the singular. V'hatzimtzum, and the contraction and the limitation. Na'aseh itchalkut has made a division between pnimiyut haratzon, between the inner will, or v'chitzoniyut haratzon, and the external, the visible will. Aval lifnei ha'meitzah v'hatzimtzum. But when we are on a level which is higher and beyond that limitation, b'hitgalut b'chinat merchav yudkei, a level at which, like a higher level where the breadth of the divine, breadth in the sense of the broadness of the divine is revealed, the opposite of meitzah, the opposite of limitation. Hari mitzad b'china zu, as regards that level, ein hefresh bein pnimiyut haratzon, there's no difference between the inner will, the chitzoniyut haratzon, and the external will. There's no difference between the face and the back of the neck. The person is completely face. In other words, every aspect of the person says who he is or she is. Just as in spiritual terms, when the person is acting together in a unified and wholesome way, the right hand and the left hand, they are not two different forces acting in a different way. Shekulo yamin, it's all the right hand. The person's trying to achieve something, and they're using their hands for that. And the left hand is totally part of the same process that the right hand is doing. So it's not as if the left hand has got some different agenda. Because the person is a unified person. So here we're talking about aspiring to some kind of inner unity where the different dimensions of our will connect together, are aligned. As was explained by the Rebbe comments then in 1988, that in the discourse called Bati Legani, I've come into my garden, which he had said earlier that year, and he spoke there about Pnimiyut Atika Kadisha. The highest level of the Sfirot is the Sfira Keter. The divine emanations, the highest level is Keter, the crown. And in the crown, there, as a Sfira, there are deeper levels, and the inner level is called Atika Kadisha. That's literally, it means the sacred, ancient one, and that's a deep. It's a phrase partly from the book of Daniel, partly from the Zohar, and the inwardness of that dimension is even more exalted, and that at that level everything is positive. The idea of right and left, when we look at it within the Sfirot, it's as if right is kindness and the left is severity. But when we look at it at this exalted height of these very exalted Sfirot in the system of the Sfirot, and we're looking at the inwardness of Keter, the inwardness of Atika Kadisha, these very high levels, to Kulo Yamin. The whole thing is the right. It's all the side of chesed, of kindness, of positivity. And that's that revelation of the inwardness of Atik, this revelation of that very exalted level of the Sfirah, that will be in the future. With the coming of Mashiach. And therefore, when everything is aligned in that way and everything is positive, here we are on the next page. Then it is not, it cannot be that there will be slavery of any kind. Only when there was some kind of inner limitation and contraction, from which comes the division between the inner will and the chitzoniut haratzon and the outer dimension of will. Then, when you have a division between the inner and the outer, and the only one you can see is the outer level, then that's the concept of slavery. All right, so let's just try to make sure that we understand this together. It's a very beautiful, very rich statement about the way that the person, through an inner alignment, is able to come to a kind of unity within themselves and with God, which is a freedom, an eternal freedom. And if they do not have that alignment, they don't have that inner unity within themselves, which also means a certain dislocation in relation to the divine as well, then can be the idea of slavery. And it's in that sense that the person, he can be living freely in London. There's no one is trying to force him to do anything that he doesn't want to do in practical terms. But nonetheless, that person can be a slave. And he's a slave to that very limitation, to that dislocation. He's a slave to his lack of self-knowledge, in a sense. And so that's what the discourse has brought us to now. And the next step will be how we get out of that slavery. But let's just see if anyone has any further comment. Rabbi Lu, do you have any comment further?
No, it's fine. You're saying it beautifully.
Okay, with the help of
And nothing to add.
Right, okay. So let's go further, because now we come to the leaving of Egypt and the going free. So let's see if we're able to follow the Rebbe's guidance in that. So there we are, talking on page Chet, and it is line 6. And that's how it continues. The Lord our God took us out from there. Since Egypt exists, a place of limitation. Because of that, there is the distinction between the external aspect of the will, from the internal aspect of the will. Then when only the external will is revealed, we have to draw down a flow in order to get free. We have to draw down a flow from a more exalted level. That's what it says. The Lord our God took us out from there. As explained in Hasidic teachings, what does that mean? It means relating to God on the essence, the level of the essence. And it's when we connect to God with the level of the essence, that's when we are able to break out of this this slavery, this inner slavery. So it doesn't actually explain here what that means in practical terms. And the commentary at the sides does not expand on it. You see, we have here we look at the sideline 47, 48. Vayotzienu Hashem Elokeinu misham, the Lord our God took us out of there. Kamavo inyana, as is explained, the Shaldagat Elokut, the level of godliness, Shabali de Gilui, which was revealed at the going out of Egypt. That means this like very exalted level of God. That's explained by Drushim in Hasidic teachings. And it doesn't actually put it any further. But I think that the thrust of this discourse is the idea of connecting with the divine on the level of the essence. And that means going beyond ordinary concepts in our relationship with God. It's certainly beyond the idea that, a person wants to do good things, feeling they will be rewarded for that. And if something bad happens, they say, how can that happen? I was doing good things. This is where the person has some sort of intimation of the essence of the divine. And these Hasidic teachings that we come together and study, it's the most wonderful thing because they give us a kind of a lens that we're able to look through and see. We're able to see something of this essence of the divine, which is the real essence of everything in existence. And it's our essence, and it's the essence of the Torah. And it's by us focusing on that essence that we go beyond all the constrictions and limitations and concealments, and we connect to the very essence of the divine in some sense. If we only point our sights in that direction, because that's the direction the Rebbe is trying to guide us to in his many teachings. And so here he's saying, focus on that divine essence. And then, V'yitera mizu, line 13, even more. Shehutzach yod gilui hakadosh baruch hu b'chvodo b'atzmo. When God was revealed on the night of Pesach, 3,300 approximate number of years ago, and we went out of Egypt, there was a revelation of the essence of the divine, even using Kabbalistic languages, the glory and the essence of the divine before the tzimtzum. The tzimtzum is the veiling of the divine radiance, of the infinite divine radiance, so the world could come into being. But here it's talking about a level which is where we go before that veiling, as is explained in Hasidic teachings, and we come to Legilui Atzmuto Umahuto Yitbarech. We come in line 16 to the revelation of the very essence and nature of the divine. She'inyan zeh haya b'pam harishona b'yetziat Mitzrayim. This happened for the first time at the going out of Egypt. So at the going out of Egypt, the essence of the divine was revealed. The result of that revelation of the essence of the divine is that it drew everything into alignment in the way that we've been talking. And as a result of that alignment, the Jewish people became free, and they were able to go free from Egypt and free from Pharaoh. Line 18. Now that was 3,300 years ago. And it's similar to that every single year. Especially at that Sedra night, the night of Pesach. Because then we are keeping the mitzvah of remembering going out of Egypt. Not only verbally, which is something that we do every day. There's a mitzvah to remember the going out of Egypt in that various ways in our prayers, the third paragraph of the Shema, for example, and other places. So we remember the going out of Egypt. but it's actually in practical action. When there is matzah, we're at the Seder night in a week's time, just over a week's time. We're at the Seder night, and there's matzah, there's maror, and we're speaking about the going out of Egypt. We're drinking 4 glasses of kosher wine. It's the most phenomenal thing. It's a phenomenal thing, and at that moment we are reliving the Exodus, in which the essence of the divine was revealed to us, which brought alignment to us as individuals, alignment to us as the Jewish people, and to a certain extent, alignment to the world, in the sense that the world, the Egyptians, let us go free. We were no longer enslaved by them. Okay. So there we have this idea that there's a potential misalignment in us, and by a sense of connecting to the essence, which is something which happened at the going out of Egypt. And it happens not only 3,000 of years ago, but it's also every year at the Sedra. And there is this sense of connection to the essence, bringing this sense of alignment to us, and that alignment means freedom. Okay, that's now. So here we are on page 10, page 9. Behold. In order that this very exalted revelation this very exalted flow should be drawn down below into our world. It explains in this Hasidic teaching that this is through its being enclosed in the Sfirot. So this is right. Okay. So that is by being enclosed in the Sfirot. And that's what it's written there in the Haggadah and in the Torah. That God saved us. We were slaves to Pharaoh in Egypt, and then God saved us with a strong hand and an outstretched arm. That's what it means, that this divine radiance flows down into the Sfirot. And so that metaphor about the strong hand and the outstretched arm, that's really talking about the revelation of the divine in the Sfirot. In other words, that the divine, the essence of the divine, which is beyond, becomes part and parcel of this world. And that's also what it means. He took us out, the way it is, looking at it in terms of the Sfirot, because it's talking about the Ka'e Aleidat Sfirot Zer Ampin Shalamayla. It's talking about the beginning of these Sfirot, these divine emanations, called Zer Ampin, which is Chesed, Gvura, Tiferet, kindness, severity, and splendor. Netzach, Hod, Yesod, the victory and submission and dedication. Those 6 Sfirot, they're called Ze'er Ampin. The literally means the small face. It's an aspect of the divine that's being revealed. And then when we were in Egypt, that aspect, Hayu b'pchinat ibur, that aspect had not yet developed properly. It wasn't revealed. You know, the Sfirot are about the revelation of the divine. And when we were slaves in Egypt, God was hidden. And so what that means in terms of the Sfirot were hidden. The Inyan v'yotzienu, when it says that God took us out, so then that hiddenness is described as pregnancy. the fetus is within the womb of the mother and it's hidden. And then when God takes us out of Egypt, it's like the birth. And so that is so it's a kind of a birth of a revelation of the divine, and it's also a birth of the Jewish people. Any Jewish teenager, if he has a little bit or she has a little bit of knowledge about what Pesach is, it's when we became a people, that's where our Jewish identity comes from, 100%. So v'yesh l'kasha zeh, so that connects, that aligns with the Kabbalistic meaning, this idea of the Sfirot going, the level of revelation of the divine going from the level which is called an embryo, and from the level of the embryo being born and becoming a baby, a living baby, with the help of God. And that relates also v'yesh l'kasha zeh im inyan yetziat Mitzrayim b'pashtut, to the simple, literal meaning of going out of Egypt. Kamosha Katuv, as it says in the Torah about this, what an amazing thing it was. Lakachat lo goy mikerev goy, that there were two nations mixed together, we together with the Egyptians, and then God took the Jewish people out of Egypt. Va'amru Rabbeinu Zal, and our sages say, Shehu al derech inyan haleida, that itself was like birth, like a child being born. We coming out of Egypt, but like a child being born. Now, our sages say that in note 33, it gives reference to various places in the Midrash, different kinds of Midrashim, where the sages say that. But it's also there as a very striking metaphor in the book of Yechezkel, in the book of Ezekiel, which talks about the birth of the Jewish people like the birth of a baby. And there, the coming out of Egypt is compared to birth in all its sort of very gory details, so to speak, in the book of Ezekiel. Then there was the birth of the people of Israel, the Jewish people. And that explains in the Hasidic teaching we're discussing, which is in the Sedra, in the Rebbe, with the Mittler Rebbe, the second Lubavitcher Rebbe's Rebbe, the same way as with a human being, a physical human being in this practical world. After the baby is born, there has to be growing development. The baby slowly, you feed the baby gets bigger. It first of all has its mother's milk. Then you move to a very, gentle beginnings of solid food. And the child grows from being small, mikapnut legadlud, it becomes bigger, it becomes more mature. So it was also going out of Egypt. And so therefore, coming out of Egypt, we were then slowly growing. And when did we actually mature? The first important stage of maturity, it was the giving of the Torah 6 weeks later. 7 weeks later. As it says, when God told Moses all about the whole idea of taking the Jewish people out of Egypt, he said to him, when you will take the Jewish people out of Egypt, you will serve God, you will serve me on this mountain. That mountain was Mount Sinai. That means the fullness of the going out of Egypt. Matan Torah is the giving of the Torah. And the growing from being a baby to being more mature is through the service of the counting of the Omer, the 49 stages in between Pesach and Shavuot, the 49 days, and then the 50th day is Shavuot. And so that is all the process of growing. The counting of the Omer is a process of spiritual maturation and growing. Now, so there we have this idea that then when we came out of Egypt, we were like a baby, and then we had to grow, and then we received the Torah, which is when we achieved maturity. Before, he said, this is what happened originally at the going out of Egypt. Then the Rebbe mentioned that this is happening, that's beginning to happen every year at the Sedra night. At the Sedra night, we have this quality of being born, so to speak. Next week, Bezrat Hashem, at the Sedra night, we should feel this, we should remember this idea of being born afresh, and then will be the process through the week of Pesach, and then 6 following weeks, 7 weeks in all, and then 49 days, then the 50th day will be Shavuot, then the 2 days of Shavuot. So, and that will be the maturity receiving the Torah. So there we have it as a kind of an annual process. And now we come to a further step on page, on this page, line 21. So this is page 10, page 9. Now the way it was then, in the same way, it is in the service of each individual man and woman, every single day. There have to be the details of this kind of service, this process, every single day. First of all, there has to be the going out of Egypt, which means the birth. And then the growth, from being a child to being a grown-up. And then we come to maturity on that day. And so each day has the elements of this process, which in other discourses, the Rebbe talks about it as the process of prayer, waking up in the morning, saying Mode'ani, washing one's hands, Negelwasser, slowly making step by step, saying the blessings, saying the prayers, the different aspects of the prayers, the Shema, the Amidah. It's all a most beautiful journey every single morning. And then one comes to study Torah and to work and to do the different things we do during the day. And all that we're now able to do as an adult because we've been through the whole process of growing. Now every generation, this is what Rabbi Shneur Zalman writes in Tanya, in every generation and every single day, each person should see himself or herself as if we went out of Egypt today, not just thousands of years ago. And even not only just at the Sedra night. The Sedra night is wonderful. But in fact, today, Tuesday, tomorrow, Wednesday is not yet Pesach. And the Tuesday and Wednesday after Pesach. These are days when we also have the going out of Egypt. That's the teaching in the Torah of life. It's a teaching in life, which applies to every individual Jewish man and woman. Then, together with that, Torah Emet, it's the Torah of truth. The Mizeh Muvan, from which we understand, Shekenu be'emet lamito, this is the real truth. Shebechol yom v'yom, that every single day, Yesh noin yan yetziat Mitzrayim, there is the going out of Egypt, ba'avodat ha'adam, in the service of the individual. It's not just a nice image. It's the reality of what life can be every day for us. Shezeu al yedei ha'avodah, and that comes through the service of bechinat panim befanim, face to face. This is an incredible statement in my view. It's saying if we can reach this face-to-face concept, and it's interesting that after the whole atmosphere of COVID and everything being on Zoom and things like that, and most of the time our own sessions in this Alef group are also on Zoom, but how much we cherish the face-to-face concept. Now let's look at it in spiritual terms. When the person achieves this face-to-face dimension within himself or herself, that's something incredible. And through that, the back of the neck, the acharayim, the back, meaning Pharaoh, we dissolve that away. And so it's reaching that type of consciousness and behavior and direction and focus within our lives, which is called face to face, as if the person's face is face to face with the divine and it's communicating to the divine and receiving the communication from the divine. And how do we get that communication? It's in the Torah. It surrounds us in every breath. It's our thousands of years of tradition and thousands of books teaching us, whether it's the Tanakh, the Bible, the written Torah, whether it is the Midrash, the saying of the sages, the Mishnah, the Talmud, the codes of law, all the different, the Rambam, the spiritual teachings, the books of Hasidic teachings, Tanya, explanations of Hasidut in talks and discourses of all the Rebbeim and our Rebbe, showing a beautiful light, opening the door to all of these teachings, helping us to reach this state of alignment with the divine. And through that, the Pharaoh, the inner Pharaoh is dissolved away. Va'avodat hamasirut nefesh, and the service of self-sacrifice, b'chol mo'adecha, being utterly dedicated to God and going beyond any limitations. Avodah shelamayla mimidida v'hagbala, a kind of service which goes beyond ordinary calculations. That's I once heard Rabbi Vogel's and he was describing what had happened after 10 years of sort of founding Lubavitch Foundation here in England. I can't remember exactly what the founding date was, whether it was in the 50s or something like that. And 10 years later, he's having a discussion with the bank manager. And the bank manager is saying, listen, you know, you're running at a loss. Each year you seem to be losing about, you know, £10,000, £20,000, you know, you're just getting deeper and deeper into debt. And if you look at that in simple terms, you say, well, the whole thing's not going to work. But you go beyond those limitations. You go beyond that crass attempt to define how you should behave. It's you know, and thank God there's schools, there's generations of students who've gone through the school system, all kinds of other activities around the country in the most amazing way. So you go beyond those limitations. It can seem sometimes.
And you're still in debt.
And we're still in debt. Yeah. Yeah. But that ability to go beyond. Sorry?
That's spiritually so rich. Billionaire spiritually, that's more important.
Absolutely.
And making other people rich spiritually, far more important.
Amen. Yeah, absolutely. That's what it's all about. Thank you. Thank you, Shannon.
Well said.
Yeah. So then, through that, so line 10, through that we, by us going beyond limitations, we dissolve away the whole concept of limitations, the limitations of Egypt. Egypt gets dissolved away in its spiritual sense of limiting the person. Then begins the inner service. And then there's the order, there's the process of growing, from being a little child, growing older, reaching maturity. Until through this, we come very swiftly to the revelation of the inwardness the inwardness of that highest level of the Sfirot, which is the inwardness of Keter, which is called here Atik, the inwardness of Atik, Sheyeh Atid Lavo, which will be in the future. The Inyan Zehu B'Tachlit Zchizut, and this process is swift, as it explains in Tanya, in the Geret HaKodesh, She'inyan HaZchizut, that it's this swiftness, Hi She'amda Lanu, that's what has protected us. She'hageulah de la'atid lavo, that the redemption in the future, Tia be'ofen shel zchizut le'chipazon, in a swift way, as the going out of Egypt. Al derech ha'chipazon she'haya b'yetziat Mitzrayim, like that swiftness. The chipazon, it was the swiftness. It's described by the sages. It's described by the sages as the chipazon de Yisrael, the swiftness of the Jewish people, the chipazon de Mitzrayim, the swiftness of Egypt, the chipazon de Shekhinah, and the swiftness of the divine presence. As is explained elsewhere. All of these teachings, they have ramifications one can explore endlessly in another discourse. And as the Maharash, the fourth Lubavitcher Rebbe explained, the author of the expression, the Chatchila Ariba, from the beginning one goes over, he explains this in a beautiful teaching. So, so this idea of swiftness and everything being with tremendous speed and alacrity and moving very fast, he explains, the fourth Lubavitcher Rebbe explains, it does not contradict what it says in another verse in Isaiah, Lo b'chipazon tetzeu, you won't be in a rush. Ki im b'shuva v'nachat tivoshehu, you'll be saved in a very relaxed way. Ki la'atid lavo yushtei ha'ma'alot. In the future, one will be able to combine opposites. One will be able to combine the idea of shuva v'nachat, something being very gentle and relaxed, so to speak. V'yachadim zen, together with that, tachlit hazchizut, with total alacrity. And so that idea is a fascinating concept in itself, the idea of joining a sense of balance and of doing things in a measured way and in a correct way, in a harmonious way, and also doing things with great swiftness and alacrity. So this is the basic theme of this discourse. There's another part we're going to look at in a moment, but the basic theme of this discourse is about us reaching this point of alignment, of connection, and we do that through going beyond limitations ourselves. There can be a step that a person feels they need to make in their connection with the Torah, their connection with mitzvah, and they have to make a step forward, which is difficult. It's like a leap for them. And then they're able to make that leap, and making that leap, that going beyond themselves, is something which itself helps to go beyond all the different limiting dimensions, and through doing that, the person comes a step further to this idea of face-to-face with the divine in our daily life. It's a very, very powerful image that's really a meaningful thing every day of one's life, every day of the year. Now, the discourse now takes a new step. And in terms of that, we have to understand that this discourse was taught by the Rebbe in the month of Nisan, the beginning of the month of Nisan, in the year just after his wife had passed away. And so let's take this a little bit further to see the end of this discourse. Omnam, however, line 3. We still have to understand this. It says in the Talmud, Kolu kol hakitz, all the promised times when the Mashiach should come, they've come and they've gone. And that was in the time of the Talmud. And even more so now, after the announcement which took place in the 1940s by the previous Rebbe, La'alta l'geula, he said, La'alta l'tshuva, immediate repentance, immediate redemption. And so we've had that announcement. And another announcement that all that is left is to polish the buttons. That's another phrase of the previous Rebbe, in order to be able to meet Mashiach Tzidkenu. And the announcement that this work, this effort has been completed. So how can we ask a person to grow from being a little child and growing to maturity and all the distinctions between the face and the back of the neck in order to reach the world to come, the time of Mashiach? All this should have been done already. We should be in the situation of the Geula, of the redemption, the coming of Mashiach. How is it? The whole discourse has been about a process, and the process takes place through the life of the Jewish people, or every year, or every day. But the process is supposed to have been realized already. Mashiach is supposed to have come. And the question is even greater, line 14, the question is even greater. No one questions this. And how do we know no one questions this? Because Mashiach hasn't yet come. Because if it would really bother someone, then Mashiach would have come yesterday, and certainly would have come this morning, and even more this afternoon. And so, especially in the afternoon of Shabbat, which is a time of delight, and the Rebbe is talking after that time, or in that time. So, what is the answer to this? Why is there this galut? Why are we still in the reason why Mashiach hasn't come is because of the darkness of galut. That itself is the question. Why is there the darkness of exile? And so he presents this as a very fascinating aspect of the way to look at a person's service of God. This is line 27 on this page, which I think is page 10. No, it's page 11. Page 11. So line 27. There are two orders of service in God. Now, in the temple, every single day, there were certain offerings that were offered in the temple. Every day, in fact, every day of the year. And then when it came to Shabbat, when it came to Rosh Chodesh, when it came to a festival or Yom Kippur, there were extra offerings. So these are two ways of analyzing the temple service. The temple service is the regular daily offering, and then there's the additional offering when it's the time for that. Now the Rebbe is presenting this as a perspective on life, that there are two ways in which we serve God, that we relate to God. There is the ordinary dimension, day to day, step by step, and there are the extra offerings which take place on Shabbat, on Rosh Chodesh, Pesach, on each of the festivals, on Rosh Hashanah, on Yom Kippur. There are extra offerings. So one way is the avodah of Tamidim Kasidram, the regular daily offerings. That is something which goes in an ordered manner, step by step. First, there is the limited dimension of work, in which we are still slaves of Achashverosh, as it said about the teachings of Purim. How do we know about Esther from the Torah? Because it says God will conceal his face, and that is Esther, means conceal. And so that's Purim. Then a month later comes the month of Nisan, the month of redemption, and there's two nuns in the month, which means Nisei Nisim, miracles of miracles, which is going beyond any kind of limitation. So that is the step-by-step kind of way. Then there's the avodah of musafim ke'ilchatam. the avodah of bringing extra offerings. And in terms of that extra dimension, we are ready for the redemption right now. So so on the one hand, there's a step-by-step process. And on the other hand, at this very moment, we're ready for the redemption. And so how can you have these two opposite ways of looking at the same time? The point is, if we realize this, that would be really to realize that what we are trying to do is bring together these two dimensions. There's the step-by-step way of looking at our lives, going forward day by day, every day being a little redemption for itself. And there's also the sense that today Mashiach should come, and it's a terrible thing if we go on. It's now in London, it's 5 to 10. If Mashiach didn't come by 11 o'clock or by 10:15, but why hasn't Mashiach come? So if you hear Ratzon, let it be the will of Hashem. I'll listen in a second. Let's just finish the discourse. May it be God's will that through speaking about these things, we should come swiftly to keep that promise that Hashem says, like the days of your going out of Egypt, I will show you wonders with the coming of Mashiach, and in a way, a very swift way in our lifetime, right now, b'mheira b'yameinu mamash, right now in our own time together. Thank you for sharing with me this very beautiful discourse which the Rebbe has given us, and with the help of Hashem. So I'm just going to stop recording.